What's going on, everyone, and welcome to the Bros Talking Soccer podcast. My name is Dave Knittel, and today's interview guest is Matt Markstone from the Dellivery Podcast. Matt, hello. How you doing?
Good, man. How are you?
Doing well. Thank you very much. If you're joining us live on YouTube, hello, welcome. Please feel free to interact with us as we go along here. I have the chat feature up here in the background, and feel free to chime in any questions or comments based on how the interview is going, or otherwise just want to chat, hit us up, and I'll do my best to incorporate that into our interview here. With that, I think that's everything. Matt, any last questions before we get into it?
No, man, I'm ready to go.
All right, let's do it. I'd like to welcome on Matt Markstone from the Dellivery Podcast, which is a Southampton-specific podcast. Matt, welcome to Bros Talking Soccer. How you doing today?
Good. Thank you so much for having me on. I appreciate it.
Of course. Thank you for being here. So we're excited to get to know you, excited to learn a little bit more about your podcast. So let's start with getting to know you a little bit more. Where are you from and how'd you get into the sport of soccer?
So actually, I'm from Santa Maria, California, same place I live now. Went to the same high school I teach at now, which you can see a little bit of in the background there. So nice fluorescent lighting, I'm sure. But yeah, I mean, for the most part, soccer wasn't a big part of my life, or football wasn't a big part of my life ever. I was a big baseball guy, and I played baseball all the way up until junior college, and then came back and started coaching baseball, and kind of soccer was the enemy for a large part of my childhood. And because that's where we lost all the kids, all the good kids, they get fought over and they'd change sports or whatever. But really my son is the reason that I even got into the sport. And when he was younger, we put him in baseball as young as I could get him. I got the league to bend the rules and do it. And then I just basically did the exact same thing my dad did to me, which I turned out to really like, and my son turned out to absolutely despise. And he came to me at the end of the season and said, I don't want to do this anymore. I want to play soccer. And I kind of, besides like crying, but to myself, I kind of just said, well, let's go do it. And we started watching the Premier League and doing all that stuff. And I've become just obsessed since then. And now he's done with that and now on to rock climbing, but I'm afraid of heights, so I'm not doing that.
Very good. I can totally relate to you on the afraid of heights, man. I do not do well with heights either. So timeline wise, so how long ago did you get into soccer?
I've been watching now. I've been watching since the year Southampton were promoted.
Okay.
So we're going on like 6 years.
Okay.
Of watching the sport and playing and doing all of it, and just kind of it's been a weird kind of transition, because I've gone from watching 162 games a year with the Houston Astros to only watching 38, and me doing it before everybody gets up, which actually it works out a lot better for my family life, because being on the West Coast like you are, there's 7 a.m. kickoffs, if not 4:30. So I can get that all out of the way before anybody else gets up and cares. And then we go along with our merry family life. And I'm not trying to slam Houston Astros games during dinner and or throwing forks and stuff when they start blowing leads late in games. So it's been a good couple seasons, but there were a couple of years in there where I was just uber frustrated, but it's all right.
I can imagine. Did I hear you saying that you started playing as well, a little bit of soccer?
I did. Yeah. That was part of it. Mostly just to learn more about it. So it started just playing with my son and then going to his practices, and then him not having coaches. So started learning more about it and coaching, and then started playing myself. I had some guys that I ran into that just invited me along, and my best friend has been a big influence. He's going to be upset that I'm not an Arsenal fan. He still has a go at me every chance he has, but he invited me to come play along, and we started playing with the kids here at school. We play against the teachers now across town once a year. It's a big kind of rivalry game. And so, yeah, I've gone from being the guy who was still playing in my Converse and didn't have shin guards to now I organize everything, and, we have numbers on the back of the jerseys and everything else. So it's all good.
I love it, man. I love that story, and that's really cool. Do you have a position that you gravitate towards? You like offense? You like defense? You playing all over the place? What?
I tend to like to play defense. There are a couple guys that I play with now that go, "Hey, the further we get you away from our goal, the better," just for the sake of everything. So generally, I play one of the outside back positions. I'm left-footed, but I pass the ball against the wall in my room a lot with my right foot. So I do try, but I'm not very good.
Oh, that's awesome. I mean, hey, everybody's got a level, and the fact that you're getting out there, learning about the game, playing is absolutely awesome. So that's a really, really cool backstory. So now, usually fans that come into the game, especially, in more recent times, I don't usually come across Southampton fans. So I need the backstory on kind of what drew you to that team and how did you choose them kind of as your Premier League team to follow?
Yeah. So, I mean, going back to kind of baseball, I've been a Houston Astros fan for forever. I fell in love with Craig Biggio and Jeff Bagwell as a kid, and just I kind of idolized Biggio growing up. And I'm not the biggest guy. I'm 5'7". I played second base. I played center field, I caught. So I did all those things. And so just looking at the turnaround that team has had in terms of how they did it, in terms of the analytics and all that other stuff, I don't know if you were a big baseball fan or not, but kind of right as I was getting out of high school, they basically shipped off the majority of their farm system for Carlos Beltran, who just retired last season. But when they did that, they kind of got rid of all the youth, and they took a gamble because Biggio and Bagwell and all the other guys were getting old, and they needed to take a shot to try to win it. And they didn't do it. And then we went through 10 years or so of just being horrible. And they kind of promised we won't do that again. We'll be smart about it. They changed their scouting and all that stuff. And so that had an impact on me when I started looking at the farm system. I wanted a team with a strong academy. I don't like the color blue very much. So like it cut half the teams out right away. And then, just kind of as you get into it and start looking around the story with the team in terms of going down and having to be purchased and being in League One and then kind of climbing back through the ranks. Then you look at some of the teams that are some of the players that have come out of that, from Alex Oxlade-Chamberlain to Gareth Bale and Theo Walcott and all those other guys. And you just look at that and say, like, if that's what they're doing, if they're putting guys at that point into the England team quite often, that's the team I want to be around, because I can watch these kind of guys come through. And hasn't happened as much lately. Some of the academy products have been struggling up until the most recent appointment, but it's that's kind of how I fell into it. I fell in love with just the way the team plays, especially under Pochettino and especially under Koeman. Not so much under Puel or Pellegrino, but that's okay. And then it's just kind of I wouldn't say that I even claimed them right away, but it was pretty clear. I was watching other teams and always kind of going like, I'd rather watch Saints play, and then that was it. So it's been a good kind of run, and it's been enjoyable, and got to see them go to Europe. I didn't go see them, but I got to see them play in Europe. And it's been kind of the up and down roller coaster. And people always ask, why? And it's like, well, I don't know. And they said, well, this is kind of more what we're used to, which is the last couple of seasons, but that's okay.
Well, I mean, that's awesome. And I have so much respect for you for not choosing, a top 6 Premier League team the way that a lot of other Americans do, or in Everton, because, the American connection there. Right. And so, it's really awesome. And so it's really cool. And that's why I was interested in hearing, your backstory. So, how have you felt about the season? What are your thoughts on Hasenhüttl, being there? You liking him as a manager?
Yeah. I think he's been a great addition and more kind of what we would have liked. The appointment of Hughes was out of the ordinary. If you look at Pochettino and then even Ronald Koeman, even though he's a big name in the sport, he hadn't done all that much in terms of coaching a high level team, I guess. Somebody will for sure disagree with that, but and then when they tried to do the same thing with Puel and then Pellegrino, and it just didn't quite work out. And when they went to Hughes, it was kind of like, well, are we going to turn into this 16th, 15th, 14th place team who just kind of recycles English managers or Welsh managers, if that's the case. But I think at that point we needed some stability, and also some change needed to happen behind the scenes. And to see him get the sign the 3-year deal after he kept us up last year, at the time I thought, well, I guess it is the right move. We do need some stability. It looks like some things are changing behind the scenes. And then, the start of the season just wasn't there. They got rid of him. They got rid of Les Reed, and that was a big change. And then we didn't have anybody behind the scenes that really. You look at our owner, and even Ralph Kruger is kind of the second in command, and he's a hockey guy, and he knows how to manage people. But in terms of selecting a coach and selecting players, there's always some worry there. So the fact that they landed Hasenhüttl, which nobody really saw coming, was awesome. And everybody then pretends to be a big Bundesliga fan, but you just look at the track record he had at the last couple of clubs he's been at, and the run in the Champions League, and what they did in the league with RB, and then that alone, and just the passion he brought, and he came in and just kind of said, like, no, we're not going to even wait till tomorrow. We're going to do it right now, and this is how it's going to go. And he shipped guys out, and it's been just kind of a breath of fresh air. So long answer, but I think he's been great. Still a little bit worried given where we're at in the table, but I think if we play anything like we did on Saturday, even though we lost to United, I think we'll be just fine.
Yeah, and so that was going to be my next question. So do you think that they do end up staying up this year? I mean, I personally think that they have enough quality, and some of the other teams that are below them right now look like they're going to stay below them. So I think they stay up, but what are your thoughts being a fan?
No, yeah, I definitely think we'll be fine in terms of staying up. It was a little bit dicey when you lose to Cardiff twice, and that's the team that's directly below you, and you just wonder, are you good enough to do it? But we really struggle against teams who sit back, and so to lose those matches was frustrating because you want to beat them, but we tend to play better against the top sides. Take the most recent Arsenal game out of it, and yeah, I think we'll be fine. I think I think there are enough players there that have been there long enough that don't want to see the team go down, as well as they all now have some confidence in terms of what they're doing, and they believe in the manager. And the fans are starting to get behind them, which hasn't always been the thing at home. The away fans have always been great, but the home fans, sometimes it doesn't take much to turn them. And so I think we're going to be just fine going forward. And hopefully, we start to have some investment over the summer and then start to move forward next year. But for now, I'd take 17th and just being in the league.
Yeah, what are you hoping for this summer, and what are realistic expectations for next year? Do you think you could push for top half of the table? Do you think you could push for European spots, depending on how you strengthen this summer? I guess, what are your kind of immediate expectations, assuming that they avoid relegation and can sort of strengthen in the window?
Yeah, so I mean, I think there's a younger generation of Southampton fans who, I've come into it and I've only ever seen us have success. I've seen us finish, I think it was 14th, 8th, 7th, 6th, and then back down a little bit. But I've only ever seen us get to cup finals or semifinals and all that stuff. So it would be easy for me to sit here and say that's where we should be. I think that there are a lot of fans who have been around, and when I went over and sat with guys after we lost to West Ham last year in Mark Hughes' first match, they all kind of said, like, this is Southampton. This is Southampton we grew up with, and we had seasons where we were surprised and we challenged and we were good. But we had a lot of seasons where Matt Letizia kept us in the Premier League. And so, like, realistically, I think anywhere, but if we were in between 10th and 12th and playing the way we are, I think a lot of people would be happy. They'd be happy for a little while. And then of course they'd want some change and want people to improve, because that's just kind of natural. But I think next season, somewhere between 10th and 12th would be totally acceptable with me. As long as the kind of improvement in the players and the improvement in kind of the aesthetics of the game were there, which hasn't always been the thing in the past couple of seasons. But we definitely, this season, we have so many players on loan right now. A lot of our record signings are out there, from Wesley Hoot and Sofiane Boufal to Guido Carrillo, who's down now with Pellegrino and playing in Spain. So those guys, we need to figure out permanent solutions for them. And they're likely not going to be at the club, but we need to get them off the books, just because we can't afford to subsidize their wages if we're going to make investment. So once that happens, I think that we definitely need another center back. We're playing with our 3 senior center backs, and that's we have 1 extra, but playing in a back 3. I don't. The talk for the past couple of years has been that they're not quite good enough. And then we definitely need another striker, because Danny Ings is great when he's healthy, but he's just not healthy enough. Charlie Austin, kind of the same thing, only maybe not as great. And Shane Long runs a lot but doesn't score. So you need help up there, because Redmond can't do it all.
Absolutely. Well, so I've always had a soft spot for Southampton, mainly for the reasons you became a fan of them. I love teams that build through youth academy and sort of investments and, rising up through that. So that's awesome. So let's transition a little bit away from Southampton. And we had Stephen Brandt on the podcast last week, and he was, singing your praises a bunch. So we didn't get the backstory on how you two connected. So can you give us a story there?
Yeah. So Steven kind of just messaged me one day on Twitter and just said, like, hey man, like, I've been listening to the show and just keep going. And it was like, well, that early on, that's nice, because some of those episodes are pretty rough. I listened back to them and I'm just like, man, what was I doing? And even I'm sure now I'll listen back to these episodes and go, like, why did I think that was okay? But yeah, he kind of just reached out, and then over time, had me on the show one time to talk about, actually what happened was I took a picture of the TV and I was watching the Dynamo play, because I I am a Dynamo fan a little bit. It's more of a casual thing. I follow them on social media. I watch them when they're on TV and it's easily accessible. But I don't go scouring the internet for streams and things like that. But I took a picture because they were playing on ESPN at that point, and he said, like, that's how I'm going to get you on, because I can bring you on to talk about Houston and talk about the Dynamo and talk about Southampton as well. So he did that, and since then it's just been kind of a constant thing of we're on a group chat and text message back and forth, and being on the show, hosted his show a couple of times, and now my show, the podcast, goes out on his feed as well. So it's all kind of it was all his doing. He found it and he made it happen, and he's been really instrumental in connecting me with a lot of people around the world, around the U.S. soccer world, that I just kind of wouldn't have access to otherwise, and wouldn't even know to look for until well past several years down the line.
Yeah, well, that's really awesome to hear. And so that transitions us into your podcast. So I love hearing origin stories and how things got their start. So can you tell us about how the Dellivery Podcast got its start?
Yeah. So for probably about the time I picked up soccer, it's all the hipster things all at once. I had this thing where I was listening to more and more podcasts, and it was just a way for me to, it was hard to wash dishes or cook and watch TV at the same time, but I could listen to a story, or I could listen to the game. I listened to a lot of radio at that point too, but podcasts just became a really big part of what I do. I don't have a TV subscription anymore, so I don't watch a lot of TV. I watch basically football, and that's it. And I use my mom's account, even though I'm a full-grown adult with a mortgage and everything else. Just
nothing wrong with that.
Yeah, you have to sometimes. So,
yeah.
So podcasting was something that I was super interested in. Started listening to a bunch of non-football podcasts, and really got into the kind of idea of production and stuff like that. And here at school, we were trying to expand the journalism program. And one of the things we were able to do is take microphones like this and broadcast some of our sporting events live, and kind of train the kids, and got a couple of guys doing kind of local journalists to come in and kind of coach the kids as to how to do it. And really what wound up happening is we wound up doing a podcast where we bring in the coaches and the players from our teams here. We'd interview them, kind of 2 7-minute interviews, have a little intro, outro, and then I'd kind of help mix it and put it all together. So I had like a year and a half of practice of doing that. And then the only Southampton podcast that we had at that point was like a once a month thing where these guys would get together, and they would sit in a studio in London and just talk about the games, and just as friends. They would pay to have it put out by the studio, and there it went. And for a long time, that was the only one. And so one of the guys moved to Switzerland and said, like, that's it for the podcast. And there wasn't anything. And I waited for 6 months while I was doing the school stuff and had all the equipment and all this stuff, and nobody did it. And I kind of talked to my wife and said, like, I think I'm going to try it. What do you care? And she said, go for it, whatever. And so I just told myself I would do it for just a period of 6 months. I'd finish the season and I'd see how I felt about it. And I promised myself I'd do one episode a week for that second half of the season. And that was the season under Puel, where we got to the cup final. And so I did it. I set out to do it. And since then I haven't missed a week yet. And a couple of times I've said, I think I'm going to take this week off, and come Thursday, I'm like, well, actually I'm going to get a guest because I have to do it. And it's really my only hobby other than playing, and then, all of the family stuff and stuff like that. But it's the thing I look forward to. I spend a lot of time on it. And I've had a lot of help from a lot of people over the past 2.5 years, and it's been great. I don't really know what the plan is after, like, I just kind of keep doing it. And we just started a newsletter, which I'm not sure was the best idea, just because it's a lot more work, but it's another thing to do, and another way to engage with the team and be around. So I think that's, for me, that's been the most, I think it's been the most important thing for me. It's just, it's an excuse to go and dig around and talk to people and call people that I should have no business calling, and do that stuff.
Well, that's really cool. And I did have the newsletter, something I wanted to ask later, but since you brought it up, might as well jump into that, and we'll come back to the podcast. So with the newsletter, like, how do you put that together? Do you have like a set template that you use? Or are you always putting in, I don't know, something like 5 articles, 2 videos? Is it, what's kind of the structure of the newsletter, and how does that, go as far as preparation?
So I have a couple of people that have agreed to write kind of the long article once a month. So 4 or 5 people that have stepped up to do that and are willing to do that. And so for me, it's, I'll write a little bit at the beginning, just kind of an intro and explain. It's an excuse to talk about something other, like connect my personal life to the podcast a little bit, or to football or whatever it is. And then from there, there's always a little, just a recap of the most recent episode, because it goes out on Friday. So there's still some time to show people that way. And then from there, I do like a match day edit. And so there's usually some sort of little stat on a player, whoever's there, just to kind of, if people want to see that. It's real short. After that, the long read usually comes, and sometimes it's been basically my requirement to the people is it just somewhere between 600 and 700 or 800 words. It could be anything you want, as long as it's connected to the team somehow. So I don't care if it's a historical piece. I don't care if it doesn't have to be a match report, but if you want it to be a match report or a preview, because that's what you're comfortable doing, go for it. It's practice. And I just kind of think of it as, for some of them, it's practice, and they want to do more writing. And as a teacher, like if I can give somebody a place to go do that, like, so be it. And it helps me out a lot, because I don't have to worry about writing everything myself. And then I usually do a predicted 11. I used to just kind of all spell it out under the Instagram post. And most people, when you have to hit more, don't. And so I was writing it, and people were asking questions like, why did you do this? And it's like, well, I explained it. So now I do it in the newsletter, and I just leave the comments on Instagram and Twitter to be themselves, and that's fine. So I do that, and then I preview the next guest, so they know who's coming, and then questions start coming in, and that's it. And so that's a pretty standard format. It may change. Like, once again, I've set out to just do it the rest of the season. We'll see how it works. If it's something we want to keep doing after that, that's fine. But it's been fun so far. Steven's always trying to get me to write more. It's one thing he wants me to do, and it's writing is hard. It's hard for me. I don't write quickly, so it takes me a little bit of time. So it's getting better. It's going. So I've enjoyed it a lot, and I think the feedback has been good too. So that's nice.
Yeah, it's always nice to have feedback. Any feedback is good, and obviously positive feedback is the best. So that's always awesome to hear. Let's get back to the podcast. So with the podcast, I mean, similar question, like, do you have a set structure with the podcast? What's a normal podcast kind of look like for the Dellivery Podcast?
Yeah, so definitely I'm somewhat OCD, so like things have to go a certain way. However, and I generally, if you're just talking about the episode itself, with what people hear, it's going to be me for 2 or 3 minutes, maybe 4 minutes, just kind of bringing in the show and trying to wrap the whole week in something that and put it in context of the conversation we had. Because oftentimes we record on Sunday, I don't put it out till Tuesday. So sometimes some things happen on Monday with whatever, and if that happens, then I have to kind of like work that in so that people understand when we were speaking. Then once I bring the guest in, we start it just kind of how you and I did it here. And then we'll talk mostly about whatever project they're working on. So if they write for a certain outlet, or they are a student, if I haven't spoken to them before, I always ask them how they became a fan, or where they live and all that stuff, and just any kind of memories they have of the team, that kind of thing. And because I want them to be able to talk about their projects and their writing and stuff like that as well, or their kind of one of the requirements I had in my mind when I started was, it's got to be somebody that has some sort of, like, whether it's an Instagram page or a Facebook group or a website or whatever it is, they got to have something that they are doing, that they are passionate about, that connects to the team. And that's how we talk about that for a while. I normally try to keep that to 10 minutes or so. And then we get into basically the most recent match. We talk about the lineup, we dissect it kind of a fair bit. Then we spend probably about 20-25 minutes on the match. Then we take listener questions. Sometimes those things go back to what we talked about in the match. Sometimes they kind of, if there's definitely a point that I wanted to make, I'll just kind of bring up the question earlier than that, so we don't have to kind of have this awkward thing where we didn't talk about the big thing in the game because everybody asked about it, we were saving it for questions. And then after that, we kind of just wrap it up and remind everybody where the guy's from, or where he or she is from, and what they're doing. And I do the intro or the kind of ending the show credits and stuff like that. I do that over with a kind of audio in the background, and then that's it. So usually I try to keep it to an hour. They've been running a little bit over. This last one ran over quite a bit, about an hour and 20 minutes, but that's okay. It just takes longer to edit, and I just have to be more diligent about telling people to stop when they do what I'm doing right now. So that's all right.
No, not at all. This is all great stuff. And so do you always have guests? Every episode is a guest?
Yes.
Okay. All right.
Yeah,
I like that.
Yeah.
And how much? Go ahead.
I was going to say, I've been encouraged at some point to get like a co-host to come along. And the only thing is like, I don't want to say I'm a control freak, but it's the idea that I know when I'm available, and I know oftentimes that it links up well with the times that other people are available. But I would never expect you to get up at 4 a.m. because that's when the guest is available, because it's noon in the UK. And now now we can't do it then because I have a co-host who can't make it. So for me, it's just easier to do it kind of on my own. Although sometimes it would just be nice to go, hey, can you just take care of the show notes or do this or that? Because there's a lot more that goes into it than I think what people realize.
Absolutely. And so, so with these interviews, it's always just me and a guest, but our normal episodes, listeners will know, are with my brothers, Christian and Matt, and just coordinating just between us is a challenge enough. When Matt moves to Houston, it's just going to get that much more chaotic. So I can completely relate to what you're saying. And generally I take the reins on a lot of things with the podcast, but I feel you when you're saying, maybe it's okay not having a co-host. So I can completely relate there. You kind of briefly touched on it, and we kind of moved past it. But how much prep do you do kind of going into the show? It sounds like you're a planner and you like to have things kind of under control. I guess, how much effort do you put into that?
Probably too much. And often most of it goes kind of unused. I have things listed out that I don't wind up using, but I think it's important because I want to go. I've listened to enough interview podcasts that when people sit down and they've done 27 other interviews on on the book tour or whatever, they don't want to be asked the same questions. They don't want to, they don't just want to recite. And if I'm as a listener, if I'm like, I've already heard this, I don't want to give people the same thing. So I try to go do some research on whoever I'm bringing on, even just enough so I can ask them, hey, on this interview, you said this, and then kind of work that in. But it's not always possible. I mean, sometimes I'm talking to a kid who's 16 who lives in, some other country, who has an Instagram account and just really likes Southampton. And there's not a whole lot of research I can do without just being really, really weird. So, so you just kind of go with it. But for the guests that come on that are, I guess, of some standing, and are recognized, I want to make sure that I'm getting something that they haven't given before. And sometimes it's hard. Sometimes they don't want to give that stuff up. And, but yeah, so to get back to the prep, my kind of routine every week is the show goes out on Tuesday. I put it out actually Monday before I go to bed. I set it to go out at 12:15 a.m. our time here on the West Coast. Tuesday is just kind of spent when I wake up in the morning, finishing off all of the posts, since now it's live and I can do all that. I tend not to do anything very, very much Tuesday night. It's generally kind of a night where the kids have a lot of homework and we have a lot of stuff to do. Wednesday, I generally take off, but then Wednesday night, I sit and I get the match day edit ready I do another account's match day edit as well. So I take care of those things. I kind of already have the outline for the newsletter. Thursday comes and I will send out, I already have the guest booked usually in advance. I'll send out the outline Thursday morning or Friday morning. And I will have the questions in there already kind of preloaded in terms of all of the intro questions and things, so they can get an idea. And then match day, I fill out the rest of the thing as I highlight major events and things like that. And so that takes up some time. And then kind of just before we go on, I will try to make sure I watch all the interviews post match. I read whatever's on the staff or a team website. I kind of collect all the pictures and stuff to try to make sure that when the preview goes out on Monday that I send out, that it's got something behind it that doesn't look terrible. I also on Mondays will do the podcast artwork, write up the show notes, and then Sunday morning, usually sometime between 4 and 5 a.m. I start recording. and I try to edit everything. We go an hour. I try to edit everything before anybody says anything to me in the morning. And then once they do, I kind of stop, and then I won't do it again until that afternoon when whether the kid decides to take a nap or they go out somewhere, and I stay back and spend an hour or two doing that. So that does it. And then, the show goes out again, and I make sure it's all finalized before I go to bed, and I start it over, and it just kind of works. And any variance to that just throws me off, and I get super upset, but it's all right.
That is quite a bit of effort and planning that goes into each piece, and so it sounds like it's amazing. And so, if we have any Southampton fans listening, you definitely have to give the podcast a listen. How has you talked about the structure of the show right now? Has that always been the structure of the show, or how has it evolved? I'm also curious to learn about how podcast sort of started and then how it's evolved to the point that it's in right now.
Yeah, so one of the major influences on the show is a show called the Arscast, and I don't know if you have an Arsenal friend or anything, but that show is still a podcast that I listen to, and he does 2 free shows a week. One's called the Arscast Extra, one's called the Arscast, and the Arscast I basically stole the format. He goes on much longer in his intro. He's much funnier. He's much better. He does he's a voiceover, not actor, but he does voiceover for commercials and stuff. So he's got all the little tricks and stuff to do voices and things like that, which I think are great. And he's been doing it. I want to say he's over 500 episodes. I think he's over 600 episodes of doing it. So he's been doing it a long time. And so I looked at that format and I said, like, that's what I want to model it off of. And so it's been pretty consistent the entire time. There was, I think, one episode where I was getting some feedback that the intros were too long. And so to try to tame it down, I just had a song that was playing kind of underneath, and I knew I had to finish by then. I did it for one episode, and somebody was like, don't ever do that again. And so I haven't. So the show has stayed pretty consistent, and sometimes I need to be challenged to kind of move it along and try something new. And we did do a live episode in when I was in London, and that was fun. It was kind of a pain to edit because you have background noise and things like that. That when you're in a kind of a silent room, you can make cuts and things like that, and people don't notice. But when the crowd noise cuts out, or there's something in the background that's distinguishable, it becomes more difficult to kind of do those things. So, yeah, it's always kind of been that. Most episodes you'll find that have been that way, and I enjoy them, but I also really like interview podcasts. So maybe that's the reason that's that way.
Do you have a favorite show or guest you've ever had on? Anyone that's been, like, I don't know, either somebody really big or during the show it was really awesome, or maybe Southampton had a big victory, and anything come to mind of a favorite?
So
or like, most memorable, it doesn't have to be favorite.
So there are a couple that stand out. One of them was I had it was the day of the EFL Cup final under Claude Puel, where we lost to Manchester United. And it was, I think, just the day itself. I live in Santa Maria. There's no other Southampton fan that lives here. So I got a couple guys that are a couple hours away that we talk. And so I found a bar in LA. I had to go down there for work. And so I had to be at work, I think at 2:00 in the afternoon. The game was on at 11. And I was like, well, I'll go do this and we'll see. And then I was going to record the episode after we got off of work and did all that stuff. But went down there and walked into this bar that was an Arsenal and Man United bar that they shared. They didn't allow Spurs fans in. And I remember just opening the door 30 seconds before kickoff and just seeing a sea of Man United fans. And then over in the corner, there were 7 Southampton fans that said, like, you're one of us, get over here. And I had never met them before. And it was just, one of the guys was on vacation from Southampton. He just happened to be in LA. And so he came and just said, like, we're going to sing the whole time. And I was like, okay, like, let's go. I drank too much, for having to go to work later, but it was okay. And then, 2 hours later, we lost, but I felt great. I had a kind of a cool story to share on the show that day. And so Christian Candler came on and we talked in 2 separate kind of increments because we had an interruption, but we talked about the match and we broke some things down and it was good. And I remember that one still, even though it was, more than 2 years ago. but I think the other one that I recorded just over Thanksgiving this time was with Chris Mackey. He does the Premier League in USA Instagram story oftentimes, and I had been following him for a long time, and I just kind of always like wondered, how do you get to that spot, where you are doing what you're doing, and what do you even do, and what role did football play? And kind of as I was doing the weird kind of digging stuff, I found out, he basically wanted to be a doctor, and it was like, well, how the hell do you wind up being, doing what you're doing now? And so like having that, and then the conversation we had, that most of it didn't make the episode because we talked for so long, and it was just that conversation, that interview, I think will always be something that I look at and I'm very proud of. And to the point where I have a section that's just titled interview on the website. And that's the only episode underneath it. Cause there are some that are archived that need to go up there, cause not all of them are on the website yet, but so he will have some company soon, but that one for me is one that stands out. And one I think that is one of the very few that doesn't go kind of stale quickly, because we're talking about a match and then the next match happens. So yeah, I would say those two. So I think it's episode 9, and then I want to say it's 103.
All right. Anyone should definitely go check that out. And that's awesome to hear. We have the website linked in the video description if you're watching live on YouTube, or in the podcast show notes. So everybody make sure to go check that out. When I was doing a little bit of digging around that website we were just talking about, I see you guys have a Patreon page, and that's something we've toyed with and sort of, looked at and evaluated, and we haven't gone that direction just yet. But, I'm curious to know why you decided to go that way. It sounds like maybe you used Arscast as a model, and it sounds like he maybe has something like that. So I just wanted to kind of get your thoughts on why you decided to offer a Patreon, and maybe advantages and disadvantages of having something like that.
Yeah. I'm pretty self-critical, and I kind of doubt myself a lot. That's been my whole life. I've always been somebody who, I thrive off of people yelling at me and telling me to do stuff better. And so to me, I was always like, the show's not good enough to expect people to pay for it. And I've offered it for free, and I think the show should remain free. And you talk about advertising, and you look at numbers that you need to get advertising, and then kind of how I personally feel about ads, which is a big thing, is I don't like them. So I kind of refuse to put it on there, especially, there are people in my family who struggle with alcohol and gambling and things like that. And although I do drink, I couldn't in my right and consciously kind of put those things on the show. And those were the only things that seemed to be available at the time. So for me, that was a no-go. And people, and I kind of just decided like I wouldn't have it, and I didn't need money to do it. This is my hobby. This is something that I like. If nobody was listening, I'd probably still be doing it. But one of the other shows went ahead and did it. And we are all kind of in a chat together, the hosts of those shows. And he kind of even said like, Matt, I don't know why you're not doing this. Like you haven't missed a week in, over 2 years. You are consistent. And the audio quality that I try to produce every week, I think is pretty good. And so it was just kind of one of those things where like, do it. And then I decided finally just to go ahead and on the 100th episode to go ahead and include that. And I had to figure out what I could offer the people who were going to support the show. And so I didn't want to burden myself and make it so much work that I hate it. Cause sometimes it is a lot of work, and it changes. I watch far fewer Premier League games than I used to. I used to just consume them all while the kids were asleep or whatever. I could just, because they're all on replay and stuff like that. And now most of that time is spent, editing, or whether it's an image or, the audio or whatever it is. So it does take some time, and I couldn't commit to doing an extra episode a week or anything like that. But once I kind of looked around what other people were doing and offering and things like that, and decided I could, we have a private chat on Discord that is just for the Patreon subscribers. They get priority for having their questions answered every week on the show. And then if you are at a certain level, the $5 a month level, which is there's a $2 level and a $5 level, you get one extra episode a month, because I felt like I could do that and bring the same sort of quality to it that I wanted, that I bring the normal show. And then, so, we played full and midweek last week. I sat in this exact same spot that I'm sitting right now, directly after the bell, just like we did, and recorded an episode. And, kind of alter my Wednesday night a little bit, got it out that night. And so the patrons can have that. And it's been a good experience. There's not a lot of them, and that's totally fine. When I launched it and people signed up, I was like, what is happening? But they've just, that money in itself, coming in, covers where it's at right now is enough to cover the cost of hosting the show, cost of hosting the website, and the domain. And that's it. I have the equipment that I think I will use for a long period of time. I can't see myself needing, I can't see myself needing a whole lot else. And so I think for now we're good, and just kind of, if they want something different, I'll try it. I'm kind of up for it. I can experiment there if I want. I can experiment with some different episode types, and if it all goes well, then good, and I'll try it on the main show. And if not, then only a handful of people heard it, and that's okay.
Yeah, well, that's really, really cool to hear, and awesome to hear about your experience, and sounds like things are really going well there. So something we need to consider on our end. So you touched on you support Houston Dynamo kind of tangentially. Do you have some sort of Houston connection with the Astros and Dynamo? Or did you just happen to pick them?
No, yeah. Mo, my dad is a massive LA sports fan. My grandma was as well. But I do remember kind of before there were pictures of me like in a Rams jersey when I was tiny and stuff like that. I went to a lot of Dodger games. But I think once I got to the age where I could select kind of my own team, and I really, the Houston thing was just Biggio. And my football team is actually the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, but that was because when the Rams moved, I watched my dad like actually cry when they moved from LA, and I said, I'm never gonna let them do that to me. And I picked a team on the other side of the continent because they couldn't get any further away. The Biggio is the reason I like the Astros, first and foremost. And then in terms of, as I started to like, and it was actually before I even liked MLS really, I was at a work thing and I had my Astros hat on, and somebody came up to me in an FC Dallas jersey and started in on me about this and that. And I was just like, I have no idea what you're talking about. But I went outside, I looked up the jersey on my phone. I saw somebody wearing the jersey, and I just went to him and said, like, hey, this guy just said this and this. And he goes, all you have to do is point to the crest at the stars that he doesn't have. And I was like, deal. And from that day on, it's been like that was enough for me to get into it. Turns out they have some really cool people who have played for the club in the past. And DeMarcus Beasley is still playing, even though he's older than me, which gives me some it gives me some encouragement. I could still go out and play with kids who are a lot younger than me. But my wife lived in Houston, but that was before we met. She also happens to be an Astros fan, even though she's from here. So it's all kind of worked out. And it's been pretty awesome.
Well, that's really cool to hear. And then so do you follow the U.S. national team closely, or more just kind of at a high level?
I would say more bird's eye view. I have a lot of friends who are super into it. I have seen the U.S. men's national team play. Actually, the stadium I've been to most frequently is RSL, is Real Salt Lake Stadium, Rio Tinto, simply because that's where the work thing was. So the guy that was giving me all the crap also invited me to a game, and we went down and I've seen them play there. I've seen the U.S. men's national team play against Venezuela there in a friendly as they were warming up for the World Cup qualifier. So that was a cool experience. But no, I'm not. I couldn't tell you all the guys who were playing from the under-23s for them. But I enjoy it, and I will always watch when they're on and support. And I do wear the jersey even if they lose. It's always more of a point. If they lose the day before, I will always wear it the next day just to let everybody know, especially because most of the kids where I live, they support Mexico. And so it's always a big thing. So we have to, let them know.
Yeah, I love it. You got to be there even in the downtimes. I mean, I'm from Philly. I support the Philly teams. You got to be there. And unfortunately for Philly, it's mainly downtimes. We lost to your Houston Dynamo in the Open Cup final last year, and all that. I've actually been to the Houston Stadium. It's in a really cool area, downtown, BBVA Compass Stadium. And it was really cool. The Union lost on that day as well. And so haven't had too much success against the Dynamo, but I don't hold it against you too much. You guys are in CONCACAF Champions League play this week. Tigres, it'll be a tough matchup. That'll be finished by the time this recording comes out. I don't know if you have any thoughts on that two-legged series.
Well, I was happy to see them get through the first leg or the first round, and I was, a little bit disappointed. I had the app on my phone from Yahoo because it said I could stream it, and then it wouldn't let me stream it on my mobile device. So I was at my son's basketball game, so I missed it. But it was nice to see them play. They didn't play as well as I think they can. They've been a lot of fun to watch just on the counterattack, but I think Tigres are going to be just a little bit too good. I mean, that's another team that a lot of kids here support. So I've had a lot of feedback from them, and they're not giving the Dynamo much of a chance.
No, yeah, I'm not either, but who knows? I mean, if anything, in this matchup, because Houston was, I believe it was Guastatoya last round. Guastatoya was more sitting back, and Houston had to dictate play. It's going to be very much reversed in this leg, and so maybe it suits Houston's counterattacking style, but I don't know. It's going to be tough. Before I ask my final question, is there anything we haven't talked about? Anything that you wanted to say? Anything I haven't asked you about?
No, I mean, I just, first off, I want to say thanks. And I know we're not quite done yet, but I feel like I've just been talking your ear off. So I hope that's all right.
No, this is lovely. Yeah, this is awesome. Right. This is what I want to hear is an interview. I want to get to know you. Listeners want to get to know you and your projects and all of that. So no, this has been fantastic. No need to apologize whatsoever. But the last question I ask all my guests, and we try to leave it on a positive note here. What's the thing you're most excited about happening in your soccer world? You can take it any direction you want, fandom, your podcast, however you want to take it. What's the thing you're most excited about happening?
Honestly, I think right now it's the direction under Hasenhüttl with Southampton. It's I can say that doing the podcast has been one of the most beneficial things that I've ever done in terms of just connecting with new people, and I've met a lot of people in all over the world. I've had people send me stuff from Australia and Canada and England and France and everywhere else, and that's all been great. That is probably that is the coolest thing for sure. But in terms of things that just excite me, I don't like a lot of stuff. So like they send me a lot of stuff and then I feel really bad. Like if I don't hang it up or if I don't put it on the wall. And now that I've kind of put all the soundproofing up and all of their stuff is in between, I don't know what to do with the rest of it. So like, although I very much appreciate it, I'm not quite sure what to do. But just having kind of watched the team for the past couple of seasons and been underwhelmed by the style of play and all that stuff, I think that Southampton, have done the managerial thing correctly this time. They definitely have a manager. We definitely have a manager who is I don't want to say too good for us, but his ambitions are higher than us. And I think I'm not afraid to admit that. And I think maybe some people will be upset with me for that, but just the fact that he's got in and he's got some belief back in some of the players. You think of Nathan Redmond and James Ward-Prowse, if anybody's familiar with those two players, they were on the fringes. There's a lot of expected of Nathan Redmond right now. And he actually came out to LA over the summer and just kind of shut everybody out and just worked out and kind of got his mind right and came back and he was okay under Hughes. He was already better than last season. But Hasenhüttl has gotten a hold of him and just turned him into an animal. And James Ward-Prowse, the same thing. He's been in and out of the team. He's been England under 23 captain for a number of years, but he just couldn't hold down a starting spot. And now he was never strong enough. He was never quick enough or anything else to play anywhere. There was always something that kept him out of a spot. And now he's just doing it all. And he's got 5 goals in his past few games, and he's scoring free kicks, which we know he can do. He's putting balls into the box, which we know he can do. And he's one of my favorite moments of the Fulham match was he put in a tackle on somebody around the halfway line that it just depleted the guy, and it was clean and it was great. And that was the fact that I think I singled that out, and a lot of people agreed that was the best part of the match right there. Is just him doing that because we wanted to do that, but we weren't sure of it. And I think a lot of that goes back to Hasenhüttl and how the team is the direction the team's going under him.
There you have it. So positive things happening at Southampton, positive things happening for Matt. Matt, thanks so much for being here. Can you tell people where to find you again? All of it's linked in the video description and podcast show notes for people to go check out. But in case people are just listening, can you tell them where to find you?
Yeah, the easiest way is just to go to southamptondellivery.com. And from there, you can click. There are links to all the major kind of audio places you can listen, I guess. And that is it. There is a YouTube channel for the show, but it's just a static image, so it's not that engaging to watch. I'm not going to fault anybody for not watching that. But yeah, southamptondellivery.com. There's 2 L's And maybe that's one thing I need to mention is there are 2 L's in delivery, simply because the show is named after the old stadium, which is the Dell. And I thought that was going to be, the list of names that I had, that was what won out eventually. And I think I've made a great choice, other than you often get, pizza places if you type in Southampton Delivery and don't spell it correctly. And that's okay. I figure if it all goes under, I'll just start writing reviews of restaurants in Southampton, and that'll be fine.
There you go. It's always nice to have a backup plan, right? All right, Matt, thank you so much again for joining us. Listeners, thank you so much for tuning in. And my brothers will be back with another episode this weekend. I will be off in the islands, but, enjoy that. Matt, thank you for being here.
Thank you.
All right, cool. Anyone that has joined us on YouTube, I see Steven, you've been here commenting away. He's had some good comments for you, Matt, very complimentary towards you. He also thinks Andrew from Arscast is one of the best hosts in the world. So, he would agree with that. Again, thank you, everybody, for watching. If you're watching live on YouTube, this will be out as a podcast, Bros Talking Soccer. You can search for it wherever you get podcasts on Thursday. But, Matt, anything you want to add in closing here?
No, I just wanted to say thank you for having me on. I really do appreciate even being considered to be a guest. It's not, I'm not normally on this side of the interview, and so it's nice to do it. It's also a little weird, but hey, I appreciate the invitation, and yeah, thank you.
Of course, man. Yeah, I know. I love interviewing people that don't always, expect to be interviewed or aren't always being interviewed, or people that are working on content or whatnot. I just find it really, really fascinating. I think listeners do as well, because again, you just have different insights, or you're doing things kind of differently than what a lot of people kind of are already listening to. So I like all that stuff, and hopefully listeners do as well. So yeah, so everybody, that brings us to the end of the broadcast. Thanks for being here. And if you're around and follow CONCACAF Champions League, I will be back in about 45 minutes on this channel doing some CONCACAF Champions League talk for 4 hours. So yeah, I got a long time ahead of me, but we'll talk to you soon, everybody. See ya.